All right, today we're talking about suffering, what it is, why it exists, and how to heal it, which is the most important part. All right, very straightforward and very simple. So, first thing to understand is that suffering is separation. Suffering is the feeling of separation from source unity, from a particular entity or from a finite perspective. Okay, source unity, God, universe, the whole, the one, the all, the creator, whatever you want to call it. I don't discriminate, I don't care. Manifestation is differentiation, meaning to manifest something, if it's all one substance, it's all one universe, God, whatever, unity, source, it's all one thing. To manifest anything is actually to differentiate, to cut that thing, that whole, into parts or into modes, right? If everything's one big ocean, a wave is a finite aperture, a finite mode of that ocean. And that's differentiation. It's distinct from the whole as it exists as a wave or a whirlpool or a drop, whatever analogy you want to use with this ocean analogy, this ocean example. Constraint, right, leads to boundaries. You have the I versus not I. So you have the identity of I am this and I am not everything else. All right. This is what we call the ego. Separation is necessary for manifestation. So to manifest something, there needs to be a distinction. There needs to be individualization in a way. It needs to be separation. Otherwise, you're just infinite potential, which is everything. The root of all fear is separation. The root trauma is separation from source. Separation trauma is the most visceral trauma because it's the first. 99 times out of 100, birth or separation from the mother is your first and most visceral, severe trauma that is unique to you, right? If the mother experiences trauma while she's pregnant with you, that's indirect, that's processed through her own apparatus, and so that's more generational trauma. Birth is the first true separation trauma and first trauma period that you experience as a being. But this is distinct from pain because most people conflate the two. They think, bodily pain, torture, physical abuse, that's suffering. No. Obviously, they're highly correlated, but they are not one and the same because the pain is a body sensation. It's not suffering. Pain without suffering exists, right? People can go through pain, but you're not necessarily suffering. Animals, for the most part, do not suffer unless they're in isolation or they're in artificial environments, right? Suffering without pain exists, right? So people can have pain and not suffer. People can have not pain and suffer more than somebody who's in physical pain. Physical pain can be working out, but you're not suffering. And being in isolation by yourself with nothing to do, with no purpose, no meaning, can be the most immensely suffering, negative thing ever. But there's no bodily pain, there's no bodily sensation. So even though pain and suffering are usually linked in some way, physical pain, they are not one and the same. They're not fully tightly correlated, right? Things like feeling of nihilism, hopelessness, despair, fear, hatred, jealousy, anger, grief, shame, guilt, pride, loss, apathy, the negative emotions that we are most familiar with, these are all require separation from source, meaning you have to perceive yourself as a distinct, separate being to experience these negative emotions. So all negative emotions are derivatives of separation from the me versus them, me versus other, disconnection from the whole. And so this leads us to emotions, the guidance system, right? We're going to start working towards how to alleviate suffering, how to heal suffering, and move towards wholeness, peace, joy, positive emotions, because positive emotions are the opposite of negative emotions, the opposite of separation. Emotions are your inner guidance system. So positive emotions is what congruence and unity feels like when you're congruent and in alignment with the whole and you feel connected to the whole. That's what positive emotions are. So positive emotions, when you feel them, means you're going in the proper direction towards unity, towards integration, towards congruence with the whole and with specifically your own nature. Negative emotions is a signal, warning, and alarm that you are incongruent or disconnected. That's what that feels like. Negative emotions, right? Separation. The emotional signals are never wrong. Depression, anxiety, guilt, shame, grief. If you have these feelings, it's telling you something, and it's not wrong. You just have to identify what it is. You can misidentify what the root cause of this depression, these negative emotions, these anxieties. And in modern society, we've jumbled up these negative emotions, and so we think that it's a chemical imbalance or that it's because of one specific thing, or just because you're not looking at life the right way, or you're broken. Like, no. Negative emotions in general, are never wrong. You have positive emotions, you're going in the right direction. Negative emotions, you're going in the wrong direction. And this is not to be conflated with pleasure. Pleasure is desire. That's a negative emotion. So don't think addictions or pleasure seeking or hedonistic activities. No, that's desire. That's negative. I should have put that on there. But desire also is there. Desire is coming from a sense of lack, separation. If you desire something, it is because you feel like you lack it. So any addictions or overindulgence, that's negative. It's rooted in some kind of negative emotion. So think of a fire alarm. This is a warning that there's incongruence, blocks, disconnection. Modern psychology, unfortunately, has brainwashed the masses into believing that we require medication to get to the root cause, so that there's no, because I mean, think about the DSM-5. There's no cures and there's no coherent, pure causes, right? We can't cause it with 100% certainty. We can't cure it with 100% certainty. There's also no biological markers. These are all the mental distortions and illnesses that are in the DSM-5, right? So what they do is they just say you got to medicate it and suppress it, or they use talk therapy. And obviously there's some amazing, incredible, state-of-the-art therapeutic services and interventions that they provide. I'm not saying everything modern psychology has done is negative or anything. It's just more so that there's this general approach, which is very materialistic, which is that this is based off this incarnation. So any trauma is going to be from this incarnation. It has to be autobiographical, means conscious to you. And essentially it has to be related to your neurochemistry somehow, or it can be alleviated or treated with drugs. Drugs are a crutch. They're never going to cure the problem. They're only going to suppress the signal, which might be beneficial temporarily, but not permanently. That's why there's no cures for these DSM-5 disorders. This is why modern psychology has not been able to alleviate the growing existential crisis of mental illness across the world, especially in developed countries, where people are getting therapy more than ever, and yet mental illness is getting worse. The reason is because they're not addressing the root cause. You got to find the root cause, and that could be in a past life, generational trauma, societal, or environmental, toxic things going on. Some people are depressed because the world is shit, because their country is bleeding them dry, because they feel isolated. The emotions are never wrong. They're giving you accurate information. You just have to find out what the true root cause of that emotion is. That's why you got to go inside of yourself. This is why meditation, journaling, inner work is so important, so you can identify that root cause. There's necessary and unnecessary suffering, right? Because all manifestation, all separation is going to have some amount of suffering. Just existing as a distinct being is going to have suffering relative to being completely unified with the whole. So as a finite form mode, there's suffering inherent in the default for being a finite aperture or a form or mode or being entity, whatever you want to call it. It's the structural cost of being finite and mortal. It's necessary, suffering. Incongruence, trauma, isolation, limiting beliefs, negative thoughts, bad habits leads to unnecessary suffering, suffering that can be unbearable, right? Enlightened beings still have a level of suffering going on because they're finite beings. They still have to, poop, go to the bathroom, eat, do normal stuff, be humans, even if they're enlightened, like Eckhart Tolle or an enlightened yogi or sage, right? They still have to live normal lives and do normal things and take care of themselves. That's a level of suffering. There has a level of responsibility of taking care of one's finite form, where when you're unified with the whole, there's no responsibility at all. You're just connected. There's just pure bliss, pure connection, unity. But all of this stuff makes it unbearable. And this is not necessary. This is very unnecessary. Modern society inflames separation and suffering. Materialism, nihilism, short-term gratification, right? Isolation, unnatural living, toxic substances, toxic environments, corruption, right? Corruption and oppression. That's unnecessary. That does not come with being a distinct finite being. This is what makes existence unbearable. Without this unnecessary suffering, the little suffering that just comes with being distinct from the whole, very manageable. You can have a great time, right? Even in your best moments, there's still levels of suffering. Think about the most fun you've ever had, right? In your entire life. Because you weren't connected, that's still a derivative of the infinite joy, unity that is source, being connected with the whole. But if you had your entire life being the best moments of your life, you'd be like, that's fine. I would do that. What makes it difficult is when you have all the crazy shit that's going on now in the world and when you feel disconnected from yourself and other people. That's when it becomes unbearable. That's when you start questioning, what's the point of existence? Why am I alive? Nothing has meaning. Everything sucks, is because of our current state of the world and the environments and the culture and the materialistic ideologies that are being spread across the world that I think are leading to mental health crisis, nihilism, and separation, suffering, immense suffering in the modern age. Healing is integration connection. So how do we heal this suffering? How do we alleviate this? Well, first, you always want to start with yourself, okay? Trauma is frozen separation. Heal the trauma to heal separation. So trauma, like I said, with the birth is the first separation trauma, usually the most intense and visceral in a person's life. And this leads to internal fragmentation, disconnection. So you have the shadow, you have soul loss or exiled parts. There's different ways of approaching this, right? Shamans would say you have a fragmented soul. Psychologists would say, exiled parts. If you're Jungian, you'd say you have the shadow and you've cast out these negative aspects of yourself that you needed to suppress to exist in the world, right? Code switching is another example. You get the point. You got the wounded inner child. That's a part of yourself. So trauma leads to this internal fragmentation. Suffering operates at all levels too. So any kind of separation you have on the physical or on the mental level, you'll feel physically and also emotionally. It's all interconnected. So mental distortions, mental suffering will manifest physically in some way, shape, or form. And it will manifest through your emotions, which is essentially represented by your soul. Pattern manifests at all levels because there's no clear fundamental distinctions. All boundaries are arbitrary, depends on the perspective of the individual observing it. There's no ontological, clear, fundamental boundaries between mind, body, and soul. It's all one thing. So if one thing's distorting your emotions, it's going to affect your mind, it's going to affect your body. If something affecting your body negatively, it's going to affect your mind, your emotions. You get the point. Inner work of bringing awareness and proper alignment to the shadow and exiled parts. So to unify yourself with the whole, you need to unify the parts within yourself because the internal is a reflection of the external and vice versa. So finding all the parts of yourself that you've rejected, the things that you hide from yourself and other people, things that you feel shame, guilt, or negative emotions around, or the parts of yourself that, when triggered, have intense negative emotions, you need to identify what those are. And you need to reintegrate them back into your whole. Because you have that healing of that internal disconnection, you will start feeling connected externally as well and start connecting with others as well, naturally. Healing is dissolving the blocks to internal congruence, connection, intention, letting go of the weight that's holding you down. So it's not about doing more. It's not about brain maxing or trauma dumping or doing all these extra healthy habits on top. It's about letting go of the things that no longer serve you, focusing on the blocks inside of yourself, and dissolving the barriers inside of yourself that have fragmented you from being connected with yourself and connected with the whole, because it's the same thing. And it all starts with bringing your awareness to those parts that you don't want to bring awareness to. That's what shadow work is. Now, if you want help with that, I have a transformation guide down below that you can get, and it will help guide you through reclaiming the parts of yourself that are exacerbating that unnecessary suffering. Because again, existence has a level of suffering to it. But life can be the best moments once you start letting go and healing the unnecessary suffering that just comes with ignorance and not knowing that we have a choice over how we feel in our day-to-day life, for the most part.